My mother's crystal glass shattered against the floor. I watched it fall from a stranger's hand in slow motion. Red wine splashing across the hardwood floors of my Vermont cabin. The woman, someone I had never seen before in my life, laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh my God. I'm so sorry." She giggled to the man next to her. Not to me. As if I wasn't standing right there in my own doorway. But I wasn't looking at her anymore. I was looking at the fireplace. At the empty space where my parents' photograph should have been. At the portrait of Michael's family that had taken its place. Tennis whites. Country club. Smug smiles. My parents. Gone. Then I saw her. Brittany. My baby sister. Sitting in my leather chair wearing my cashmere sweater. Hair elaborately curled. Makeup perfect. Holding another one of my mother's crystal glasses. She looked up. Saw me standing there with snow melting in my hair. And smiled. Not a guilty smile. Not an apologetic smile. An annoyed smile. "Oh, Catherine," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "You're early. I thought you were in Aspen." The music was too loud. Cigarette smoke hung in the air of my no-smoking cabin. Strangers filled every corner. And my sister sat there like a queen in my castle. Acting like I was the intruder. That's when I knew. After 17 years of sacrifice, of paying her bills, of being her ATM, her safety net, her solution to every problem, I finally saw the truth. I wasn't her sister. I was a resource to be used. And she didn't feel guilty about it at all. Before I tell you what I did next, if you want to hear how this ends, hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment if you've ever had to set boundaries with family. Trust me, you'll want to hear this. Because what happened in the next 24 hours changed everything. But first, let me take you back. Back to the beginning. To the day our parents died and I became more than a sister. I became a parent. A bank. A punching bag. For 17 years, I said yes to everything. And this Christmas, standing in that doorway, watching strangers destroy my sanctuary, I finally said no. It began the day our parents died. I was 24, fresh out of business school, with my MBA from Boston University, just starting my career at Hendricks and Associates, one of the most prestigious real estate investment firms in New England. I had worked so hard to get there. 4 years of undergraduate business courses, 2 brutal years of graduate school, countless networking events, 3 internships. I had finally landed my dream position as a junior analyst with a starting salary that felt like a fortune at the time, $65,000 a year. In Boston. It wasn't much. But to me, it was everything. It was freedom. It was possibility. It was the beginning of the life I had worked so hard to build. Then came the phone call. February 14th. Valentine's Day. I remember that detail because I had plans that evening with a guy I had been seeing, someone from my MBA program who worked at a venture capital firm. We were supposed to go to this new Italian restaurant in the North End. I was at my desk, reviewing financial models for a property acquisition in Cambridge, when my phone rang, an unknown number. The state trooper's voice was professional but gentle. There had been an accident on Route 2. Black ice. A semi-truck. My parents' sedan had been hit head-on. They died instantly. He assured me, as if that made it better. They didn't suffer. They didn't know what was coming. I remember sitting at my desk, the phone pressed to my ear, unable to process the words. My boss, Margaret Chen, found me there an hour later, still staring at my computer screen, tears streaming silently down my face. She drove me to the hospital to identify the bodies. She sat with me while I made the calls to other family members, of which there were few. My father's brother in Arizona, my mother's cousin in Florida, distant relatives who would send flowers and sympathy cards, but who had never really been part of our lives. And Brittany, 15-year-old Brittany, who was at a friend's house when the accident happened, who I had to pick up and tell that our parents were never coming home. I still remember the sound she made when I told her. Not quite a scream. More like the air being sucked out of her lungs. She collapsed into me, and I held her while she sobbed. And I realized in that moment that everything had changed. I wasn't just Catherine anymore. I was the only parent Brittany had left. The funeral was a blur. Casseroles from neighbors. Cards from my parents' friends. The reading of the will, which was straightforward. Everything split between Brittany and me. The house in Brookline, which would need to be sold. Their retirement accounts. Their life insurance policies, which thankfully were substantial. My father, ever the cautious accountant, had made sure they were well insured. $500,000 for each of us. It felt obscene, putting a dollar amount on their lives. But those first few months, I was grateful for the money because it meant I could take care of Brittany without drowning financially. I sold my studio apartment in Fenway, the one I had just moved into 2 months before the accident, and moved us into a 2-bedroom rental in Newton, close to Brittany's high school. I couldn't bear to live in our parents' house. Too many memories. Too much grief in every room. We sold it for $400,000 and put Brittany's share in a trust for college. I tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy. I went to work every day, though I wasn't performing at the level I had been before. Margaret was understanding, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes when I had to leave early for Brittany's parent-teacher conferences or when I couldn't travel for site visits because Brittany had a soccer game or a school dance or just needed me home. My colleagues, most of them childless, 20-somethings focused on climbing the corporate ladder, couldn't relate. I watched as people I had started with got promoted while I stayed stagnant. And Brittany, God. Brittany was a mess, which was understandable. She was 15 and traumatized. She started having nightmares. She couldn't sleep alone. For 6 months, she slept on an air mattress in my bedroom because she was terrified of being alone in the dark. Her grades plummeted from A's and B's to C's and D's. She quit the soccer team. She stopped hanging out with her friends. She clung to me like I was the only solid thing in her world, which I suppose I was. I took her to therapy. Dr. Morrison, a grief counselor who specialized in adolescents. It helped. Slowly, Brittany started sleeping in her own room again. Her grades improved. She rejoined the soccer team her junior year. By the time she was applying to colleges, she seemed almost normal again. We had gotten through the worst of it. I thought we had survived. She got into UMass Amherst with a partial scholarship, not a full ride, but enough that with her trust fund and my help, she could go without taking on massive debt. I was proud of her. She was going to major in marketing, she said. She wanted to work in fashion or advertising. She was excited about the future for the first time since our parents died. I helped her move into her dorm that August, driving her and all her stuff in a rented U-Haul. Her roommate seemed nice. A girl from Worcester who was also majoring in marketing. I set up Brittany's side of the room, made her bed, stocked her mini fridge. Before I left, Brittany hugged me tight and whispered, "Thank you for everything. Catherine, I don't know what I would have done without you." I drove back to Boston feeling lighter than I had in 3 years. I loved my sister, but I was exhausted. I had put my entire life on hold to take care of her. Now, maybe, I could focus on myself again. I was 27. I could date. I could go out with friends. I could work late and travel for business and actually advance my career. That optimism lasted about 6 weeks. The first call came in late September. Brittany needed money for textbooks. She had underestimated how expensive they would be. Could I send $500? Of course I could. Textbooks were essential. I sent the money without question. 2 weeks later, she needed money for a sorority rush fee. She really wanted to join Alpha Delta Pi. It would be good for her social life. Good for networking. The rush fee was $300. And if she got in, the semester dues would be another $800. I hesitated on that one. Brittany's trust fund was supposed to cover her living expenses, and she had a small allowance from it each month, but she promised this was a one-time thing. And I remembered how isolated she had been in high school. If joining a sorority would help her make friends and feel connected, wasn't that worth it? I sent the money. Then it was a new laptop because hers broke, a winter coat because Boston winters were brutal, and her high school coat wasn't warm enough. Textbooks for spring semester. Money for spring break because all her friends were going to Cancun and she didn't want to be left out. A security deposit on an off-campus apartment for sophomore year because the dorms were too noisy and she couldn't study. Each request seemed reasonable on its own. Each one had a justification. And each time, I told myself this was temporary. Once she graduated and got a job, she would be self-sufficient. I just had to get her through college. But college was when things really escalated. Sophomore year. Brittany moved into that off-campus apartment with 3 other girls. The rent was $1,200 a month. Split 4 ways. $300, which should have been easily covered by her trust fund allowance. But somehow, she was always short. Could I cover the difference? Just this month. Just until her financial aid refund came through. I started paying $400 a month toward her rent. Then $500. Then $600. Because one of her roommates moved out, and they couldn't find a replacement, and could I please help just until they found someone? Junior year. She got a car. A used Jeep Grand Cherokee. Navy blue. 2 years old. She said she needed it for a new internship she had gotten at a marketing firm in Springfield. Public transportation wouldn't get her there. The car cost $18,000. Her trust fund could cover the down payment, but the monthly payments were $350. Plus assurance, which was another $200 a month because she was under 25. Could I help just with the insurance? Just until she graduated and could afford it herself. I said yes. Because what was the alternative? She needed the car for her internship. The internship would lead to a job. It was an investment in her future. Except the internship was unpaid. She didn't tell me that part until after she bought the car. So now I was covering her insurance and making up the difference in her living expenses because she was working 20 hours a week for free and couldn't keep her part-time job at the campus bookstore. My 30th birthday came and went with little fanfare. Brittany called to wish me happy birthday, but spent most of the call talking about her own stress with finals and the internship and her roommate drama. I had dinner alone at my apartment with a bottle of wine and a Marie Callender's lasagna. I remember sitting there thinking, is this it? Is this my life now? I was making decent money by then. I had been promoted to senior analyst, and my salary had climbed to $85,000. But after taxes, rent on my own place, student loans, and supporting Brittany, I had almost nothing left. My savings account hovered around $3,000. I couldn't remember the last time I had taken a vacation or bought myself something that wasn't strictly necessary. My friends from business school were buying condos, going on European vacations, getting engaged. Sarakim, who had been my study partner throughout our MBA program, got promoted to associate at her firm and invited me to celebrate at a rooftop bar in downtown Boston. I went, and I listened to her talk about her bonus and her upcoming trip to Greece, and I smiled and congratulated her. And I felt a burning resentment that I was ashamed of. I was happy for Sarah. But I was also jealous in a way that made me feel small and petty. Senior year, Brittany met Michael Hayes, whose father owned Hayes Luxury Motors, a chain of high-end car dealerships. Michael, who drove a BMW 7 Series and wore custom-tailored suits, and took Brittany to Boston for dinner at places with dress codes and wine lists the size of phone books. Brittany was smitten. This is it. Catherine, she told me on the phone, her voice breathless with excitement. He's the one. I know we're young, but I just know. He's smart and ambitious, and his family is so connected. His dad knows everyone in Boston. This could change everything for me. I was happy for her. Relieved. Actually, if Brittany was serious with someone from a wealthy family, maybe she wouldn't need my help anymore. Maybe Michael and his family would support her now. But that's not what happened. Instead, after graduation, Brittany and Michael moved in together into an apartment in Quincy. A nice apartment. 2 bedrooms. Hardwood floors. Granite countertops. The rent was $2,400 a month. Split between them, that should have been $1,200 each. Easily affordable for 2 college graduates, but Michael's job at his father's dealership paid less than expected. He was starting at the bottom, learning the business. His salary was only $40,000 a year. And yes, he had a trust fund, but it was tied up in investments managed by his parents, and he couldn't touch it until he was 30, so they needed help with rent. Just for a year. Just until Michael got promoted and his salary increased. Could I help? Brittany had gotten a job too, doing social media marketing for a local boutique. She made $35,000 a year. Between their two salaries, they should have been fine, but they weren't. Because they had student loans. Because Michael's car payment was $600 a month. Because they had credit card debt from college. Because they liked to go out to dinner and take weekend trips and maintain the lifestyle that Michael had grown up with. And somehow, I became responsible for making up the difference. $600 a month toward their rent. Then $800. Then $1,000. Plus I was still paying Brittany's car insurance. And her cell phone bill. And sometimes, when she called, crying about an unexpected expense, her credit card minimum payment, I tried to set boundaries. I really did. At 32, I sat Brittany down and told her I couldn't keep supporting her financially. She was a college graduate with a job. It was time for her to be independent. She cried. She told me she was doing her best, but everything was so expensive, and she didn't understand how I expected her to make it on her own. Michael's parents weren't helping them. They said Michael needed to prove himself first. And she couldn't ask them anyway because they already thought she was beneath their son. Did I want her to fail? Did I want her to lose the apartment and end up back on my couch? And that was the thing. I didn't want that. The thought of Brittany moving in with me again, of losing what little independence I had, was unbearable. So I kept paying, because it was easier than dealing with the alternative. When I was 34, I got promoted again. Associate Director of Acquisitions. My salary jumped to $120,000. It felt like an enormous amount of money. I could finally start saving seriously. I could start investing. I could maybe even buy my own place. But as my income increased, so did Brittany's expectations. The requests got bigger. She needed a new car because the Jeep was having problems. Could I co-sign a loan? She wanted to go back to school for a graduate certificate in digital marketing. Could I help with tuition? Michael wanted to start a business. Something to do with artisanal coffee. Could I invest? Just $10,000? They'd pay me back with interest once the business took off. I said no to the business investment. That was my line. I wasn't going to hand over $10,000 for some vague coffee shop idea that Michael had sketched out on a napkin. Brittany didn't speak to me for 2 weeks after that. When she finally called, she was cold. She said she couldn't believe I didn't support her dreams, that I was holding her back, that I clearly didn't care about her happiness. I felt guilty for days. Maybe I should have invested. Maybe I was being selfish. But Sarah, who I had been having lunch with regularly, was horrified when I told her. "Catherine," she said, leaning across the table at the Thai restaurant we always went to, "you need to stop. This is financial abuse. She's manipulating you." That word, abuse, shocked me. I wasn't being abused. I was helping my sister. That's what family did. But Sarah wouldn't let it go. She's an adult. Catherine. She's 30 years old. She has a college degree and a job. And she has a boyfriend whose family is loaded. The fact that she's still coming to you for money is a choice. She's choosing to take advantage of you. I knew Sarah was right. But knowing something and acting on it are different things. I had spent 11 years in a pattern of saying yes to Brittany. It felt impossible to change. Every time I thought about setting firmer boundaries, I remembered 15-year-old Brittany sobbing in my arms after our parents died. I remembered the promise I had made to myself that I would take care of her. How could I abandon that promise now? So I kept going. I kept saying yes. I kept paying. And I kept getting more and more exhausted, more and more resentful, more and more aware that my own life was passing me by, while I funded Brittany's. That's when I bought the cabin. I was 36 years old. I had just closed the biggest deal of my career. A mixed-use development in Cambridge that brought my firm $22 million in profit. My bonus was $300,000. After taxes, I walked away with $180,000. It was more money than I had ever had at once, and for the first time in my life, I decided to do something completely for myself. I started looking at properties in Vermont. I had always loved the mountains. My parents used to take us to Stowe for long weekends when Brittany and I were kids. Those were some of my happiest memories. Hiking through fall foliage, building snowmen in the winter, sitting by a fire with hot chocolate and playing board games while snow fell outside. I wanted that peace again. I needed it. I found the cabin through a private listing. 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, on 5 acres with a view of Mount Mansfield. It had been built in the 90s by a couple who were now moving to Arizona for retirement. They had taken care of it beautifully. The logs were in perfect condition. The stone fireplace was stunning. The kitchen had been recently updated with new appliances and countertops. They were asking $350,000. I offered $325,000. They accepted. I paid cash. $125,000 from my bonus, and $200,000 from my savings, which I had finally managed to build up over the previous 2 years. The day I signed the papers and got the keys, I cried. Not sad tears, tears of accomplishment, of pride. This was mine. No one could take it from me. No one could claim it. It was the first thing I had ever done that was purely for my own happiness. I spent the next 3 months furnishing it. I drove to Vermont every weekend, sometimes taking Friday off work to give myself 3 full days there. I scoured antique shops and estate sales for furniture that fit the rustic aesthetic I wanted. I found a leather sofa at an estate sale in Manchester, a handmade dining table from a craftsman in Woodstock. I hung my parents' photograph above the fireplace, the one from their 25th anniversary, where they were dressed up and smiling and so clearly in love. I unpacked my mother's crystal glasses, the ones I had kept in storage since selling their house. I bought soft quilts and thick curtains and filled the bookshelves with my favorite novels. It was my sanctuary, my escape, my reminder that I was more than just Brittany's caretaker and the firm's workhorse. I was Catherine Chen, a woman with taste and interests and a life of her own. I invited Brittany and Michael up for Christmas that first year. I was proud of the cabin. I wanted to share it, and it went well. Brittany seemed impressed. She kept taking pictures for Instagram, posing by the fireplace, on the porch, in front of the view. Michael was quiet but polite. We cooked a turkey together, played cards, went for a short hike on a clear day. It felt like the kind of normal family moment I hadn't had in years. Brittany thanked me multiple times for having them. She said it was the best Christmas she'd had since our parents died. When they left, I felt good, hopeful, like maybe we had turned a corner in our relationship. But in January, the requests started up again. Brittany needed a new laptop. Her old one finally died. Could I help? It was $1,500 for the one she wanted. I sent $1,000 and told her to cover the rest. In March, their apartment's rent went up. The landlord raised it from $2,400 to $2,700. Could I increase what I was sending? Just by $300 a month? In May, Brittany called crying. She had been fired from her job at the boutique. It wasn't her fault, she insisted. The owner was impossible to work with, but now she had no income, and they needed my help more than ever. Could I cover the full rent for a couple of months? Just until she found something new? I said yes, because what else could I do? Let them get evicted. She found a new job 6 weeks later. Reception work at a dental office. It paid less than the boutique job, only $30,000 a year. But it was something, except now that I was paying more of their rent, Brittany didn't ask me to reduce it back to what it was before. She just assumed I would keep paying. And I did. Because I was too tired to fight. Because every time I tried to have a conversation about money, Brittany got defensive and emotional. And I felt like the bad guy. By the time I was 38, I was paying $1,200 a month toward Brittany's rent, $300 for her car insurance, $100 for her cell phone, and random other expenses that came up at least twice a month. I was subsidizing her life to the tune of $18,000 to $20,000 a year, and I had been doing it, in various amounts, for over a decade. Sarah was furious on my behalf. We were having dinner at her apartment, and I was explaining the latest request. Brittany wanted to go on vacation with Michael to the Bahamas. His parents had invited them, but they needed help with the flight costs. $1,500. Catherine, Sarah said, putting down her wine glass and looking at me seriously. You need to cut her off. Completely. This is never going to stop unless you stop it. I can't, I said. She's my sister. She's all I have left of my family. No, Sarah said firmly. You're all she has left of her ATM. There's a difference. That hurt. But it was also true. I knew it was true. I had known for years. But knowing and changing are different things, and I was so deep in the pattern that I didn't know how to get out. Which brings me to this year. This Christmas, I was exhausted in a way I had never been before. I was turning 40 in March. 40. And what did I have to show for it? A good job. Yes. A nice apartment in Boston. Yes. And a cabin I barely got to use because I was always working to pay for my own life and Brittany's. I hadn't been on a real vacation in 5 years. I hadn't been in a serious relationship since my late 20s because I never had the time or energy to invest in someone else. Most of my friendships had atrophied because I was always too busy or too stressed to make plans. Sarah was really my only close friend left. And that was only because she was persistent. This Christmas, I decided I was going to be different. I was going to Vermont. Alone. I told Brittany in November. I'm going to spend the holidays at the cabin. I said over the phone. I need some time to myself. There was a pause. Oh, she said. Her voice sounded strange. Okay. I thought maybe we could come up again. Michael's parents are being really difficult. And I thought a quiet Christmas like last time would be nice. Not this year, I said firmly. I need this time alone. She didn't push back, which surprised me. Okay, she said. I understand. Have a good time. I felt relieved and proud of myself for setting a boundary. This was progress. I told my boss, Margaret, that I would be working remotely the week of Christmas. We had a big deal closing the week before, a commercial property in Portland that had been in negotiation for 8 months. It was complicated, with multiple investors and a tricky financing structure. I was point person on it, which meant long days and late nights and more stress than I had dealt with in years. The deal finally closed on December 22nd. I stayed at the office until midnight, signing documents, coordinating with lawyers, making sure every detail was perfect. When it was done, Margaret opened a bottle of champagne in the conference room. It was just the two of us left in the office. She poured 2 glasses and handed me one. You did incredible work on this, Catherine, she said. This was a $9 million deal, and you handled it flawlessly. I'm recommending you for senior director. It comes with a significant raise in equity in the firm. I felt a surge of pride and exhaustion. Thank you, I said. That means everything. Go home, she said, smiling. Get some rest. Enjoy your cabin. You've earned it. I left the office at 1 in the morning. I went home to my apartment, threw some clothes in a bag, grabbed the stack of books I had been meaning to read, and drove to Vermont. It was 3:30 in the morning when I arrived. The cabin was dark and cold. I started a fire, made a cup of tea, and sat on the sofa wrapped in a quilt, watching the flames and feeling tension slowly drain from my body. This was what I needed. Quiet. Solitude. Peace. I woke late on the 23rd. I spent the day reading and taking a long bath and cooking myself a simple meal. Not phone calls. No emails. Just me, and the silence and the snow that had started to fall again. That evening, I got a text from Brittany. Hey, just checking in. Hope you're having a good time at the cabin. Miss you. It was a nice message. Normal. I texted back. Miss you too. It's beautiful up here. I hope you and Michael have a good Christmas. She sent back a heart emoji. I smiled. Maybe we really had turned a corner. Maybe she was finally growing up. On the morning of Christmas Eve, I went for a hike. The trails near the cabin were gorgeous, winding through pine forests and opening up to views of the mountains. It was cold, in the low 20s, but the sun was shining and the sky was a brilliant blue. I felt more at peace than I had in years. I got back to the cabin around noon, rosy-cheeked and hungry. I made lunch and settled in with a book by the fire. I had turned my phone off. This was my time. My sacred, uninterrupted time. I turned my phone back on around 5, just to check for any emergencies. There were 3 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize, and 2 texts from Brittany. The first text said, "Call me when you can." The second text, sent an hour later, said, "Never mind. Don't worry about it. Enjoy your time." That second text worried me. It had a weird tone. I called her back. It went to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail again. I told myself not to worry. Brittany was probably just being dramatic about something. But I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. I tried to go back to my book. But I couldn't focus. Something felt wrong. At 7, I texted her. Hey. I missed your call. Everything okay? No response. I tried calling Michael. It also went to voicemail. Now I was genuinely concerned. What if something had happened? What if they were in trouble? I spent the evening anxious, checking my phone every few minutes. No response from Brittany. No response from Michael. I barely slept that night. The next morning, Christmas Day, I still hadn't heard from them. I called again. Voicemail. I was starting to panic. I even called the hospital near their apartment to see if anyone matching their description had been admitted. Nothing. Finally, at noon, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I would drive to their apartment. Make sure they were okay. It was a 3-hour drive from the cabin to Quincy. I could be there by mid-afternoon. But then I thought, what if they had come to the cabin? What if that's what those missed calls were about? Maybe they decided to surprise me and were trying to let me know. Maybe they were waiting at the cabin right now, and I had missed them. I decided to check the cabin first. If they weren't there, I would drive to Quincy. I got in my car and drove back toward the cabin. I had been staying at a hotel in Stowe for Christmas Eve, giving myself a little change of scenery. The drive back to the cabin took 20 minutes. As I turned onto my private road, I saw them, 2 cars in my driveway. The BMW SUV and the Mercedes sedan. Relief flooded through me. They were here. They were safe. But then confusion. Why were they here? And whose Mercedes was that? I pulled up behind the cars. The cabin was blazing with light, every window glowing, and I could hear music. Loud music. That's when the relief curdled into something else. Something that felt like dread. I got out of my car, walked up to the cabin. The front door was unlocked. I pushed it open, and I saw what I described at the beginning: the chaos, the strangers, the violation. But I didn't tell you everything. I didn't tell you about the smell that hit me. Not just the overpowering scented candles, but cigarette smoke? Someone had been smoking in my cabin. I had a strict no-smoking policy. There were even signs. But there were ashtrays on my coffee table, overflowing with butts. I didn't tell you that the kitchen was a disaster. Dirty dishes piled in the sink. Food left out on the counters. Wine bottles everywhere. Someone had spilled red wine on my reclaimed barnwood dining table and not cleaned it up. The stain was already setting in. I didn't tell you that when I looked more closely at the Christmas tree, it wasn't just gaudy. It was tilted, like it had been set up carelessly. Ornaments had fallen off and been left on the floor. And under the tree were presents. Dozens of them, wrapped in expensive paper with elaborate bows. Presents for Michael's family. None for me. I didn't tell you that my bedroom door was open, and I could see that someone had been sleeping in my bed. The covers were pulled back. There were clothes draped over my chair. Someone had gone through my closet. That's how Brittany was wearing my cashmere sweater. She had gone into my bedroom, my private space, and taken my clothes. When Brittany saw me and said, "Oh, Catherine, you're here earlier than I expected. I thought you were in New York." Or was it Aspen? There was something in her tone that wasn't just dismissive. It was smug. Like she was pleased with herself. Like this was all part of some plan. Mikhail, standing behind her, looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. His face was pale. His hands were shaking slightly. He knew how wrong this was, but he wasn't going to say anything. Not in front of his parents. And his parents. Mr. Hayes stood up from my dining table, where he had been sitting like he owned the place, and looked at me with barely concealed contempt. His wife, dripping in diamonds, had that pursed lip expression of someone who smelled something unpleasant. The other guests, people I had never seen before in my life, were clearly Michael's family friends. Wealthy, entitled people who probably thought it was perfectly reasonable to take over someone else's property for their holiday celebration. I didn't just ask what was happening. I demanded to know. My voice came out harder than I expected. Sharp. Cold. "Brittany," I said slowly. "What the hell is this? Who are these people and why are they in my house?" Brittany's smile faltered just a fraction. She glanced at Michael, then back at me. Catherine, don't be dramatic. We talked about Christmas plans and you said you weren't coming. So I thought we could use the cabin. Michael's parents wanted somewhere special to celebrate. And this place has so much space. You thought you could use my cabin, I repeated. Without asking me, you just decided to bring a dozen people into my home without my permission. I tried calling you yesterday, Brittany said, her tone defensive now. You didn't answer. So I figured it was fine. You figured it was fine, I said. You figured it was fine to break into my house. I didn't break in. Brittany shot back. I have a key. That stopped me. A key? How do you have a key? She shrugged, trying to look casual, but her face was flushed. From last Christmas, you gave me one in case of emergencies. I never gave you a key, I said, but even as I said it, I remembered. The spare key I kept hidden under a rock by the front porch. She must have taken it. Made a copy. Mr. Hayes cleared his throat. His voice was booming, used to commanding attention. Young lady, I don't appreciate your tone. We were told this property was available for our use. If there was a miscommunication, that's between you and your sister. But we are guests here and deserve to be treated with respect. Guests, I turned to look at him fully. You're not guests. Guests are invited. You're trespasser. His face turned red. How dare you speak to me that way? Do you know who I am? I don't care who you are, I said. This is my house. Mine. I bought it. I own it. And none of you have any right to be here. Mrs. Hayes stood up now, her diamonds catching the firelight. Well, this is absolutely unacceptable. She looked at Brittany. You told us your sister wouldn't mind. You said she was traveling and the cabin would be empty. I thought she would be, Brittany said quickly. She told me she wouldn't be here. I said I was spending Christmas at the cabin. I said. I was very clear about that. I told you I needed time alone. But you weren't here last night, Brittany countered. Or this morning. I called and you didn't answer. So I figured you changed your plans. So you just decided to throw a party in my house to invite people I don't know to use my things without asking. The room had gone very quiet. The music had been turned off at some point. Everyone was watching us now. This family drama unfolding in front of them. I could feel their eyes on me, judging me. I was the villain in this story they had been told. The uptight older sister who was ruining Christmas. Michael finally spoke. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper. Catherine, I'm so sorry. This was a mistake. We should leave. Don't apologize to her. Mr. Hayes barked. We've done nothing wrong. His daughter invited us here. Your girlfriend, I corrected. Not your daughter. My sister, who doesn't own this property, and had no right to bring you here. I looked at Brittany. She was staring at the floor now, her arms crossed defensively. And that's when I saw it. Really saw it. She had planned this. She had waited until she thought I was gone, then orchestrated this entire thing. She wanted to show off to Michael's parents. She wanted them to think she had access to this beautiful property, that she was sophisticated and connected. She had used my cabin as a prop to impress them, and she hadn't thought about how I would feel. Or maybe she had and just didn't care. Because in Brittany's world, my things were her things. My money was her money. My cabin was her cabin. I existed to support her, to provide for her, to make her life easier and more impressive. All of you, I said, my voice steady now. You have 24 hours to clean this place. Remove every trace of yourselves. And get out. If this cabin is not returned to exactly the condition I left it in, I will call the police and report you for trespassing and destruction of property. You wouldn't dare. Mrs. Hayes said. Try me, I replied. Catherine, please. Brittany said, her voice rising to that whiny pitch she used when she wanted something. You're embarrassing me. Michael's parents are important people. They have connections. You don't want to make enemies of them. I don't care about their connections. I said, I care about my home being violated. I care about my sister, thinking she can do whatever she wants with my property and my life without any consequences. Mr. Hayes stepped forward. He was a big man. used to intimidating people with his physical presence. "Listen here," he said, his voice low and threatening. "We came here in good faith. We paid for food, for decorations, for everything you see here. And you're going to throw us out on Christmas Day. What kind of person does that? The kind of person who's been taken advantage of for 17 years. I said. The kind of person who's finally done. I turned and walked out before anyone could respond. Before Brittany could cry or Mr. Hayes could threaten or Michael could try to smooth things over. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove away. I could hear Brittany shouting after me. Her voice was high and panicked. "Catherine, wait. We can talk about this. Please don't do this." But I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. I drove for 2 hours in a blind rage before I even knew where I was going. I ended up at that roadside motel, a rundown place called the Pine Lodge with peeling paint and a flickering vacancy sign. I checked in and went to my room, which smelled like bleach and old carpet. I sat on the bed, my hands shaking, my heart pounding, and I finally let myself feel everything I had been holding back. The anger was overwhelming. It burned in my chest, made my hands clench into fists. How dare she? How dare she take my sanctuary, my one safe place, and turn it into a stage for her performance? How dare she invite strangers into my home, use my things, sleep in my bed, wear my clothes? How dare she act like it was her right to do so? But beneath the anger was something deeper. Hurt, betrayal, the crushing realization that to Brittany, I wasn't a person. I was a tool, a means to an end, something to be used when convenient and discarded when not. I thought about the last 17 years. Every sacrifice I had made, every boundary I had let slide, every time I had said yes when I wanted to say no. I had given her everything. My 20s, my 30s, my money, my time, my energy, my life. And she had taken it all without question, without gratitude, without ever once considering what it cost me. And now this final, ultimate violation. She had literally taken my home from me. She had looked at the one thing I had that was purely mine and decided it was hers too. I sat in that motel room until dawn, and I made a decision. Not the half-hearted, maybe this time decisions I had made before. A real decision, a permanent one. This was over. All of it. I was done supporting Brittany. Done sacrificing for her. Done being her ATM and her safety net and her emotional dumping ground. I was done. I opened my laptop. I logged into my bank account. And I started dismantling the financial structure I had built around Brittany's life. The automatic payment for her apartment. Cancelled. The payment for her Jeep. Cancelled. The payment for her insurance. Cancelled. The payment for her cell phone. Cancelled. The credit card I had co-signed for her. I called the company and removed myself as a co-signer, which they allowed because my credit was excellent and hers was not. Then I called my financial advisor, Tom, who I had been working with for 5 years. It was 6 in the morning on Christmas Day. But I left him a voicemail explaining the situation and asking him to help me legally separate my finances from Brittany's. Then I called David Martin, my lawyer friend from college. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice groggy. "Catherine, what's wrong? It's 6 in the morning on Christmas. I need your help," I said, and I told him everything. The cabin, the party, the 17 years of financial support, all of it. When I finished, David was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Jesus, Catherine, I've been waiting for you to make this call for years." "That's what Sarah said too," I replied. My voice cracked. "Why didn't anyone tell me sooner?" "We tried," he said gently, "but you weren't ready to hear it. Are you ready now?" "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." David talked me through what I needed to do. Documenting everything. Removing Brittany from any legal documents where she was listed as a beneficiary or contact. Changing my will. Writing a formal letter stating that I was no longer financially responsible for her and that any debts she incurred were hers alone. Gathering evidence of the trespassing in case I needed to take legal action. He also suggested I consider getting a restraining order if Brittany's behavior escalated. "I hope it doesn't come to that," he said, "but you need to protect yourself." By noon, I had made 17 phone calls and sent 26 emails. Every financial connection between Brittany and me was being severed. It felt surreal. It felt terrifying. It also felt necessary. My phone started ringing around 1 in the afternoon. Brittany. I didn't answer. She called again. And again. And again. I let them all go to voicemail. Then the text started. Catherine, please call me back. We cleaned everything. I promise the cabin is perfect. Please don't do this. I need you. Then Michael texted. Catherine. I'm so sorry. This was all a huge mistake. Brittany misunderstood and thought you wouldn't mind. Please call us so we can talk. I didn't respond. I turned off my phone and tried to sleep. But I couldn't. My mind was racing. What if I was overreacting? What if Brittany really had just made a mistake? What if I was being cruel? But then I thought about the smug look on her face when I walked in. The way she had said, "Oh, Catherine, you're here earlier than I expected." Like she had been hoping I wouldn't show up at all. Like she had wanted to have her party and get away with it. No. This wasn't a mistake. This was calculated. And it was the culmination of 17 years of her taking advantage of me. I wasn't overreacting. If anything, I was finally reacting appropriately. I turned my phone back on the next morning. 43 missed calls. 72 text messages. Most from Brittany. Some from Michael. A few from numbers I didn't recognize. Probably Michael's family calling to harass me. And then I saw it. A text from Brittany sent at 2 in the morning. My rent payment was rejected. What did you do, Catherine? Please, I'll lose my apartment. Another text, 10 minutes later. My car insurance payment didn't go through either. Why are you doing this to me? And another at 3 in the morning. I just got a call from the credit card company. They said you removed yourself. Now the full balance is my responsibility. Catherine, this is $8. Ling ling ling. I can't pay this. Reading those texts, I felt a pang of guilt. But I also felt something else. Resolve. This was exactly what needed to happen. Brittany needed to understand that she couldn't support herself on the lifestyle she wanted. She needed to face reality. I texted back one message. Brittany, I'm not going to support you financially anymore. You're 31 years old. It's time for you to be responsible for your own life. Her response was immediate. You're abandoning me. After everything I've been through. After Mom and Dad died, and I had no one but you. You're just going to throw me away. I'm not throwing you away. I typed back. But I'm also not going to sacrifice my entire life for yours anymore. You need to learn to stand on your own. How am I supposed to do that? She wrote. I don't make enough money. You know that. I need your help. Then get a better job. I wrote. Or get a second job. Or ask Michael's parents for help since you're so close to them. Or ask Michael to support you. But I'm done. She called immediately. I didn't answer. She called again. I turned my phone off. I drove back to the cabin that afternoon. I needed to see what condition they had left it in. As I pulled up to the property, I saw that all the cars were gone. The place looked quiet, peaceful, like nothing had happened. I unlocked the door, bracing myself for a disaster. But what I found was the opposite. The cabin was spotless. More than spotless. It was pristine. Every surface had been scrubbed. The floors were mopped. The dishes were washed and put away. The furniture had been arranged exactly as I had left it. My parents' photograph was back above the fireplace. My books were back on the shelves. Even the wine stain on my dining table had been professionally cleaned, though I could still see a faint shadow of it. On the kitchen counter was a note in Michael's handwriting. Catherine, I am so incredibly sorry for what happened. This should never have occurred. We have cleaned everything to the best of our ability. The spare key Brittany had has been left here. If there are any damages or anything we missed, please send me the bill and I will take care of it immediately. I take full responsibility. Again, I am truly, deeply sorry. Michael. The spare key was sitting next to the note. I picked it up. This little piece of metal that represented so much violation. I should have felt relieved. They had cleaned up. They had left, but I didn't feel relieved. I felt hollow. I walked through every room, checking everything. They really had been thorough, but there were small things that bothered me. My cashmere sweater was washed and folded on my bed, but it didn't fit quite the same anymore. Someone had moved my jewelry box, and though everything was still there, it felt violated. Like stranger hands had touched my private things. The towels in the bathroom were the wrong towels. They had replaced the ones they used with new ones, but they weren't my towels. They were expensive. High thread count towels. But they weren't mine. This place didn't feel like my sanctuary anymore. It felt contaminated. Tainted by their presence, I spent the rest of the day trying to reclaim it. I moved furniture around. I lit my favorite candles. I made myself dinner. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been permanently damaged. That night, lying in my bed which they had put fresh sheets on. But still, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Brittany. About where she would sleep tonight. Whether she had figured out how to pay her rent. Whether she hated me. And I felt guilty. God, I felt so guilty. But I also felt something else. Relief. Like a weight I had been carrying for 17 years had finally been lifted. Like I could finally breathe. The next few days were brutal. Brittany called constantly. I didn't answer. The voicemails she left ranged from sobbing apologies to screaming accusations. "You're a terrible person," she said in one. "How can you do this to family? Mom and Dad would be ashamed of you." That one hit hard. Would our parents be ashamed? Or would they understand that I had given everything I could and it still wasn't enough? I wanted to believe the latter, but I wasn't sure. Michael called too. His messages were more measured. "Catherine, I understand you're angry. You have every right to be it. But please, Brittany is in a really bad place right now. She's talking about hurting herself. Can we please just talk? I'm worried about her." That message terrified me. Was she really suicidal? Or was this manipulation I didn't know? I called David. He advised me to take the threat seriously but not to engage directly. He suggested I call a wellness check on Brittany's address. Have the police check on her. I did. I called the local police in Quincy and explained that my sister had made suicidal statements and I was worried about her. They sent officers to do a wellness check. They called me back an hour later. "Your sister is fine. She's upset but not in immediate danger. We advised her to seek counseling." I felt relief. And anger? She had manipulated Michael into thinking she was suicidal to get him to pressure me. How many times had she done this over the years? How many times had I changed my plans or sent money because she claimed she couldn't handle things? New Year's came and went. I stayed at the cabin alone. I tried to enjoy it. But everything felt different now. The peace I had felt before was gone, replaced by a constant low-level anxiety. Was I doing the right thing? Was I being too harsh? Was Brittany okay? I went back to work on January 2nd. Margaret noticed immediately that something was off. "Are you okay?" she asked, stopping by my desk. "You look exhausted." "I'm fine." I lied. Just a complicated holiday. She didn't push. But she watched me carefully for the rest of the week. I tried to focus on work, to lose myself in spreadsheets and property analyses and conference calls. It helped a little. Sarah took me out for drinks on Friday. I told her everything that had happened. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You did the right thing," she said. "I know it doesn't feel like it right now. But you did." "Then why do I feel so terrible?" I asked. I felt tears building and I blinked them back. "Why do I feel like I failed her?" "Because you're a good person," Sarah said. "Because you've been programmed for 17 years to feel responsible for her. But Catherine, you didn't fail her. She failed herself. And more importantly, she failed you." The texts from Brittany continued, but less frequently. She had figured out that I wasn't going to respond. They got angrier, more accusatory. I got evicted. Happy now. My car was repossessed. "Thanks a lot. I hope you're happy in your fancy cabin while I'm sleeping on a friend's couch. Michael and I are fighting constantly. His parents blame me for ruining Christmas. This is all your fault." I read each one. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because if I engaged, I would get pulled back in. And I couldn't let that happen. Then, in late January, everything changed. I got a text from Mark Thompson, a mutual friend who knew both Michael and me from college social circles. "Catherine, I thought you should know. Michael filed for divorce. It's getting messy. Brittany's not handling it well. My heart sank. Divorce already. They had only been together for 7 years. Married for 3. But I guess without my financial support propping up their lifestyle, the cracks in their relationship had become impossible to ignore. Mark sent another text. Michael's parents basically disowned Brittany after the Christmas incident. They found out she had been using you for money, and they think she's a gold digger. Michael is getting a lot of pressure from them to end things. It's ugly. I felt a complex mix of emotions. Sadness for Brittany. Relief that she was facing consequences. And also, vindication? I had been right. The relationship with Michael had been built on a shaky foundation. And without my money supporting them, it collapsed. But I also felt grief. Because as angry as I was at Brittany, she was still my sister. And her life was falling apart. And part of me, a big part, wanted to reach out and help her. To tell her it would be okay. To offer her money for a lawyer or a place to stay. But I didn't. Because I knew that if I did, nothing would change. We would fall right back into the old pattern. And I couldn't do that. Not anymore. Instead, I focused on my own life. I threw myself into work with a ferocity I hadn't felt in years. Without the constant distraction of Brittany's crises, I was sharper, more focused. I closed 2 major deals in January, a retail complex in Portland and an office building in Providence. My boss noticed. In February, she called me into her office and told me that the promotion to senior director was official. It came with a raise to $160,000 a year and equity in the firm. I should have been thrilled. This was what I had been working toward for years. But I felt numb, hollow, like the success had come too late. After I had already spent the best years of my life exhausted and drained, but I accepted the promotion. I thanked Margaret, and I decided to make changes in my life beyond just cutting off Brittany. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Ellen Raff, who specialized in family dynamics and codependency. In our first session, I broke down completely. I told her everything. All 17 years. Every sacrifice. Every boundary crossed. The cabin incident. The guilt I felt about cutting Brittany off. Dr. Rav listened without judgment. When I finished, she said, "Catherine, you've been living in survival mode for almost 2 decades. You're not even sure who you are without the role of caretaker. Part of our work together will be helping you figure that out. Over the next few months, therapy helped me understand things I had never articulated before. That I had used Brittany as an excuse not to build my own life. That being needed made me feel valuable. And without that, I didn't know my worth. That I had enabled Brittany's dependency because it made me feel important. It was hard to hear. But it was also freeing. Because once I understood the pattern, I could start to break it. I started dating again. Nothing serious at first. Just coffee dates and dinners with men I met through friends or dating apps. It felt strange after so many years. But also exciting. I went hiking with a graphic designer named Tom. I went to a Red Sox game with an engineer named Chris. I had dinner with a lawyer named James who made me laugh so hard. I snorted wine out of my nose. None of them became serious relationships. But that was okay. I was learning how to be a person again. How to have interests and hobbies and conversations that didn't revolve around problem solving for someone else. I reconnected with old friends. Julie Chen, who I had been close with in college but had drifted away from, reached out on LinkedIn. We met for lunch and talked for 3 hours. She was now a marketing director at a tech company, married with 2 kids. She told me about her life. And I told her about mine. It felt good to have a friendship that was reciprocal, where both people gave and took equally. I went back to the cabin in March. It was my 40th birthday. I had half expected to feel depressed about the milestone, but I didn't. I felt hopeful, like I was finally starting the life I should have been living all along. I spent the weekend alone, hiking and reading and cooking, elaborate meals just for myself. On my actual birthday, I opened a bottle of expensive wine and toasted myself in front of the fireplace. "Happy birthday, Catherine," I said out loud. "Here's to the next 40 years being better than the last 40. I hadn't heard from Brittany in over a month. Part of me worried. Was she okay? Where was she living? But I didn't reach out. I had learned in therapy that I needed to let Brittany live her own life. Make her own mistakes. face her own consequences. It was the only way either of us would ever be healthy. Then, in April, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. Catherine, this is Jen, Brittany's old college roommate. Brittany asked me to reach out. She's been living with me for the past 2 months. She's not asking for money. She just wanted you to know she's okay and that she's been going to therapy. She said to tell you she's starting to understand some things. That's all. Take care. I stared at that text for a long time. Therapy. Brittany was in therapy. That was good. That was progress. But I didn't respond. Not yet. Because I needed to be sure this was real change. Not just another manipulation. A month later, in May, I got a text directly from Brittany. It was the first time she had contacted me since the angry messages in January. Catherine, I've been going to therapy twice a week. It's been really hard but also really helpful. I'm starting to see how unhealthy our relationship was. How much I took from you. How little I gave back. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I'm working on myself. I got a full-time job as a receptionist at a dental practice. It doesn't pay much, but it's stable. I'm also waitressing on weekends. I'm learning to live within my means. It's hard, but I think it's what I need. I hope you're doing well. I miss you, but I understand if you need space. I read that text 5 times. It sounded different from her other messages. Less disparity, less manipulative, more honest, more mature. I texted back. I'm glad you're getting help. I hope it's helping you find what you need. I'm doing well. I miss you too. That was all. Short. Neutral. But not cold. I wanted to leave the door open, a crack, but I wasn't ready to throw it wide. We texted sporadically after that. Maybe once every 2 or 3 weeks. Short updates. She told me about her therapy, about how she was learning to budget, about how she was working on not seeing herself as a victim, about how Michael had moved to California for a job and they were on decent terms despite the divorce. I told her about my promotion, about therapy, about the friends I was reconnecting with, about the life I was building. I kept my messages brief and boundaried. I didn't offer help. I didn't offer advice unless she asked. I was learning to have a relationship with her that didn't revolve around her needs. In June, she asked if we could meet for coffee. I thought about it for 3 days before responding. Finally, I agreed. But I set clear parameters. A coffee shop in Wellesley, halfway between where she was staying and Boston. 1 hour. Just coffee. Nothing more. The day of our meeting, I was nervous. I got there 10 minutes early and sat in my car, giving myself a pep talk. You don't owe her anything. You're not responsible for fixing her problems. This is just coffee, just a conversation. You can leave anytime you want. I walked into the coffee shop and saw Brittany already there. She looked so different. Thinner. Yes. But also somehow more solid. Less of that frantic energy she always used to have. She was wearing jeans and a simple t-shirt. No makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She saw me and stood up. For a second, we just looked at each other. Then she said, "Hi." "Hi," I said. We sat down. There was an awkward silence. Then Brittany spoke. "Thank you for coming. I know you didn't have to. I wanted to," I said. It was true. Despite everything, I had wanted to see her, to make sure she was really okay. "I'm sorry," she said. Her voice was quiet but steady. "Really, truly sorry. For everything. For the cabin. For years of taking advantage of you. For never appreciating what you sacrificed for me." I looked at her carefully, trying to see if this was manipulation. But her eyes were clear. She wasn't crying. She wasn't asking for anything. She was just apologizing. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "That means a lot." She nodded. "My therapist has been helping me see patterns. How I've been dependent on you since I was 15. How I never learned to take care of myself because you always took care of me. How I started to see you as someone who owed me things instead of someone who was choosing to help me. That's exactly it," I said. I felt tears starting and I blinked them back. "I enabled it too," I said. "I made it worse by never setting boundaries. By always saying yes. I thought I was helping you, but I was actually hurting both of us. We were both at fault." Brittany said, but I'm the one who took advantage. And I'm so sorry for that. We talked for 2 hours, way past the 1 hour limit I had set. We talked about our parents, about the grief we had both carried differently, about how young we had been when they died and how neither of us really knew how to handle it, about how our relationship had become twisted into something unhealthy. I'm working 2 jobs now, Brittany said. The dental office during the day and waitressing on weekends. It's exhausting, but for the first time in my life, I'm paying all my own bills, my rent, my groceries, everything, and it feels good. Scary, but good. I'm proud of you, I said, and I meant it. This was the Brittany I had always hoped she could be. We hugged when we left. It felt different than it used to. Less like I was holding her up and more like we were meeting as equals. That was 6 months ago now. Brittany and I have been rebuilding our relationship slowly. We text regularly. We've had dinner 3 times. She came to visit the cabin last month. And it was okay. Not perfect, but okay. She was respectful of my space. She asked before touching anything. She thanked me multiple times for letting her visit. She brought a small gift, a framed photo of our parents that she found while going through some old boxes. When she left, she hugged me and said, I'm going to keep working on myself. I want you to be proud of me. Not because I need you to be, but because I want to be proud of myself. Our relationship will never be what it was. And that's good. What it was wasn't healthy. But we're building something new. Something based on mutual respect and boundaries and real love, not obligation and dependency. As for me, I'm better than I've ever been. The promotion has opened new doors. I'm being considered for a partnership track at the firm. I've started dating someone seriously. A lawyer named David. Actually, yes, that David. My lawyer friend. It started as friendship and slowly became more. He understands boundaries. He respects my independence. He makes me laugh. We're taking things slow. But it feels right. I've been spending more weekends at the cabin. I installed a new security system and changed all the locks. I've redecorated parts of it, making it feel like mine again. I hosted a small gathering there last month. Sarah and Julie and a few other close friends. We cooked together, drank wine, hiked, sat by the fire. It felt like I was reclaiming the space, making new, better memories. I still think about those 17 years sometimes. All that time and money and energy I poured into Brittany, and I feel sad about it. Angry sometimes, but mostly, I feel at peace, because I learned something essential. That setting boundaries isn't selfish. That saying no isn't cruel. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stop enabling them and let them learn to stand on their own. I learned that I spent 17 years trying to save my sister, but I was actually preventing her from saving herself. The moment I stopped being her safety net was the moment she finally learned to fly. So here's my question for you. Have you ever had to set boundaries with someone you love? Has someone in your life been taking more than they give? Drop your story in the comments below. Let's support each other through these difficult decisions. And if this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more real talk about family, boundaries, and finding yourself. Remember, you can't pour from an empty cup. Take care of yourself first.